Is FM26 any better at AI squad building than FM24? A common complaint about FM24 was that AI managers would either hoard Wonderkids, they'd buy them off of you and then leave them rotting in the reserves. They would sign way too many right backs and left backs and never play them. And in some instances, the squad would get really old and they'd be playing 34-year-olds rather than giving anybody under the age of 25 a chance. So I've created a fresh save. I've loaded the men's and women's leagues in England, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the United States to give a little bit of variety. So I've holidayed it 10 years into the future, and we're going to look at a wide range of clubs to see how they've built their squads. Are they holding on to what makes them the club they are? We're going to look at Bilbao, Dortmund, Brentford, Atalanta, all on the men's side. Then look at Chelsea on the women's side. Then we'll look at some of the big spending clubs like your Manchester City and your PSG. We'll also look at Inter Miami to see how the AI handles the very complicated rules of MLS. And I couldn't do a video like this if I didn't take a look at some of the highest potential players in the game and see what happens to their careers. Do they all go to PSG? Now, some of the criticism I've gotten on my recent videos is that it's a beta, it's a beta, it's a beta. I'm very aware that it's a beta. I'm going to show you some things that I think highlight that I don't think, if there's something wrong with how AI squads are built, that it is going to massively change before the launch of the game. For example, Mo Salah has retired. That's normal. You'd expect that. When you click on his biography, the biography bolded above where my cursor is duplicated down to where my cursor is here. And his milestone screen, I don't know if this will show up on video, but you can see here, there's some light text that says toggle button group. And if you don't believe me, just go look at a player milestone, because it also does it in my current save with Alexandra Pop. So it's not like it's only retired players. So you could go check your FM26 beta and see the same thing. And the reason I bring all of this up is because those are clearly errors that have to be fixed. The AI manager stealing your Wonderkids or hoarding too many right backs and left backs would be pretty far down the pecking order in terms of urgent fixes for Sports Interactive. So again, I think what we're seeing here, and I'm playing on the Thursday patch, is what we're going to get on Tuesday, most likely. Now, the first club we're going to look at is Atletico Bilbao, because I think, as most of us know, Bilbao only sign players from the Basque country. And if I try to add in a manager 10 years into the future at this point in the game, the board culture says cannot sign non-Basque players still. The transfer policy says Atletico Bilbao are not allowed to sign non-Basque players. But does the game follow its own rules? In this instance, yes. Every player, and I've checked all of the other squads, like the youth squads and all that kind of stuff, for the men's team, except for Nico Williams, who does have a second nationality of Basque, which is correct, are of that second nationality. Likewise, the women's team is also identical. So they've got this one hard-coded into the game, and it has not changed. Let's look at Dortmund. When you first start a save in July of 2025, they want to play attacking football, develop players using the club's youth system, sign German players, sign players under the age of 23 for the first team, and so on. Now, that's board culture. That is not something down here like a dedicated transfer policy, and the board and supporter culture can and does change in FM26. In 2025, the average age of the Dortmund squad is 25 years old, and there are 27 players. And in 2035, the average age is 26 years old, and there are 25 players. But I told you the board culture can change, and it has. It just says sign players under the age of 23 for the first team now, as the entire board culture. They don't care if you sign German players or anything else. The supporters do, but the board just wants under the age of 23. And diving a bit deeper, let's see what they've done recently that would be aligned to that board culture. Because again, I can't guarantee, I don't have a save point for every year in between. I essentially have the beginning and 10 years. So the board culture changed at some point, but we don't know when. I think it's probably safe to assume with Dortmund that they want to always sign under 23 players. That's kind of their business model. Now, this is one of the things I'm talking about that I think this is why this wouldn't get fixed, because little things like these arrows to go back and forth in the various years for transfers don't work. You've got to use the drop down. Again, not game breaking, but just a minor annoyance. They'll fix that first. So it's June 30th, so obviously we're just about to enter the 35-36 season. They only have one out. That doesn't really tell us a lot. If we go to 34-35 though, are they signing players under the age of 23? We have Emir Yus, who is now 24, but was 22 when they signed him. Finn Leimester, who would have been 24 when they signed him, so close. Mauricio Luis, who is 20, so yep. Arnold, who is 22. Kevin Boca, who is now 23. And Nerman Krovinovic, who's now 22. So, from a very high level, Dortmund's AI manager is doing what the board wants. Now let's see if they're hoarding players. What I've done here is I've edited selection info and just added wages. I've also noticed you can't delete custom views, so be careful with that. So when you first look at this, you go, uh-oh, this looks like they've signed a bunch of players that can play right back, right, left, and center, right. Also some DM, right, left. There's a lot of fullbacks here. But when you look at the wages, it's not as bad. So you've got, this is probably your starter. He's in the right back spot. He's earning a lot of money in comparison to Mauricio Luis, who is probably that backup player on a youngster contract. And again, they've got a lot of midfielders, but some of them are listed, some of them are wanted. Overall, when I look at this, it does not scream to me they've broken how they've built the squad. And again, there's 25 players currently in the senior squad, have an average age of 26. So at a high level, it seems to be in line. Next, we're going to look at Brentford because it shows off how the board culture can change dramatically and also some very weird things when you look at the history of the club. So back in 2025, they've got 28 players with an average age of 24. And if you wanted to take over Brentford at this point in the save, they want you to play attacking football, possession football, do not sign players over the age of 29, play high tempo pressing football, and sign players from the lower levels of the domestic game. But by the time we get to 2035, they have 26 players with an average age of 31. What happened? The board now have zero expectations, zero board culture, none. The supporters still want attacking, entertaining football, but the board said, just help. And so I was wondering, what happened? Why do we now have 31 years old? Again, if you look at this, the number of players is a bit higher than it's going to be the next day. I've got this done on June 30th. I do all of my, kind of experiments going from July 1st, or in this case, July 7th is the first time you can load a league in England. And then you go until the end of the next season, which is June 30th. So they have a ton of players whose contracts are literally expiring today, and they have even more that are expiring in a year. So they're kind of in a squad rebuild type phase. I haven't touched selection info, and it's moved the players over here and the position here. This is what I'm talking about. Okay, let's get that back together. So this one, it's a little bit harder to tell. Are they hoarding players? Well, it doesn't really look like it because they're having a lot of potential squad turnover right now, and lots of players are wanted and listed and all that kind of stuff. So then I thought, well, let's go look at the club history, which again, this is a new UI, which is fine. It's over here on the left. And this is where, for me, things get murky. It automatically has it comparing with a club. I don't want to compare it with a club. Can I compare it against myself? Why? That's just strange. So it's clearer now. Okay, so I don't know what year this is. I guess this is 2025, but I have no idea what this graph means. I have a hunch that this graph is not real, or the lines are skewed, where this makes it look like they almost won the Premier League in, what would that be, 2023? Because this is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. 2023. Did Brentford win the league or come in second or third in 2023? No, I just looked it up. They finished ninth. I mean, I knew they didn't come in second, but so it makes this graph hard to trust, but it looks like they then in the future got relegated and bounced back and got relegated and bounced back and then did okay and then got relegated and bounced back and are doing okay. So that, to me, ignoring that the graph is wonky, makes sense that the board would say, we had this vision, we just want to stabilize, so we're not going to put any expectations on you as a manager. And with that amount of chaos, you would expect it to be kind of lots of swings in transfer spend. So the previous season, they spent 56, they received only 5.5. The season before that, more even, 32.5 to 28. Before that, they spent 148 million euros and only received 26 on players leaving. So you kind of see this part, I think, makes sense. And I think it also makes sense that a club that was going up and down, if you get relegated from the Premier League, you're wanting to restock with players that have been there. You're not going to go get a bunch of 19-year-old Wonderkids and hope that they can get you promoted. You're going to go sign some veterans that have experience, that have done this before, to get you back up there. And that over time is going to drive your average age up. Back at the beginning in July of 2025, Bergamo, which is really Atalanta, have 28 players with an average age of 25 years old. And if you took them over, this is the board culture that you'd get. And in 2035, the board want you to sign players under the age of 20 for the future, which makes sense. They've now got 35 players. Are they hoarding them? Let's go find out. But the average age is 24. This looks a little more like they're hoarding players, but they have a ton that they've got listed out for loan or that are transfer listed or are asking to leave. So it's kind of hard to tell without spending an hour looking at this squad. Maybe you can pause and take a look if you want to dive deeper. a lot of these loanees, the club don't have a role for the player, or they would prefer him to play more regular football elsewhere, or to assure him of the playing time he wants. So with those things, you go, well, this is a much larger squad, but are they doing what a lot of FM players do and they sign a bunch of young folks and loan them out? I guess overall, without doing a deep analysis on Atalanta's squad here, it doesn't come across as overarchingly broken. And I guess you could argue that if all of those players they have listed for loan are unable to be loaned, and then they just have this massive squad and they can't register them, then that is kind of broken. But we're not done. We're going to look at Man City, PSG, and also the women's game. Before we get there, if you're enjoying content like this, hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. If you're watching on mobile, if you hit like, apparently in some countries, there's a hype button. And you can hype 3 videos a week, and that really helps as well. You can also look at patreon.com/grayhairgaming or becoming a YouTube member. The link to Patreon is in the description. Thanks. Now let's talk about some of the massive clubs with what seems like unlimited spending capabilities. Manchester City, which I think is interesting that in the game it's shortened to Man City. I just noticed that. That's a bit strange. Have 33 players in the senior squad with an average age of 25. They've got 38 players in the under 21 and 23 in the under 18. And now 10 years later, they have 28 players instead of 33 with an average age of 28 rather than 25 in the senior team. We will take a look. But first, the under 21s have 21 players, down from 38. And the average age was 18, is now 19. And in the under 18s, they've got 17 players instead of 23. And as you'd expect, the average age is 16. So actually, Manchester City's squad is smaller than it is today in the game. Now, I'm not looking at the board's expectations for Manchester City because I think it's just buy really good players and win versus obviously like a Bilbao where you have to sign a player with a certain nationality. But looking at the squad, again, I'm not saying there's not any kind of hoarding going on here, but it's kind of hard to tell. They've got some really young players, so I'm not expecting he's not making any money at Man City from Man City standpoint. And again, some of these behind the wanted are young players going out on loan or at least being listed for loan. Things look a little different when you look at overall the transfer spend, and I'm kind of curious how this scales in reality in the next 10 years. But in 34-35, you could argue this is relatively balanced spend for a club the size of Man City. And that spend is spread out. So they're picking up the likes of Barcola from PSG and Anthony Gordon from Newcastle, and then getting Wesley on a free. So it's a bit balanced. The year before, not nearly as much spend. The year before that, they spent $350 million, but only on 2 players, and one of them is Endrick from Real Madrid for $340 million. And they only had $62 million going out. The year before that, $109 million on transfers in, $20 million on transfers out, $193 in, 31.5 out. Again, I'm not saying it's perfectly balanced, but with the club the size of Manchester City and the financial might that they have, 115 charges pending, it just doesn't come across to me like they're scooping up all of the Wonderkids in the game. Now, they are poaching from PSG quite a bit, and in 27-28, they spend $581 million. Who do you think you are, Liverpool? But they pick up Rodrigo for $241 million and Camavinga from Real Madrid for $237 million. So it's like big clubs poaching other big clubs, really massive players. And then 315 and 83 to be complete in 26-27. We will look at PSG, but I wanted to look at Chelsea women because right now my understanding is Chelsea is one of the richest, if not the richest clubs with the best players in the Women's Super League. At the start of the save, you've got 25 players with an average age of 26 years old and kind of spread out. As you can see, we've got 3 center backs and then a right back / center back. And at first glance, I mean, it looks relatively balanced. 33 players is a lot, but obviously with the red, they've got players out on loan. So they're kind of doing the Chelsea thing of buying lots of players and loaning them out. And by the time we get to 2035, they're down to 28 players with an average age of 28 years old. So they've dropped 5 senior players and increased the average age. And I kind of wonder if that's because there's not as many talented players coming through in FM26 because it's not as developed on the women's side of the game. On the youth side, they do have 31 players, average age of 17. And throughout their history, the transfer spend is pretty balanced. So 1.2 million spent on players coming in, 925 on players going out, 1.6 and 3.4 out, 3.8, 2.6. You can, as I click through these, you can kind of see as they go. I really wish that these arrows worked. So again, even for a club the size of Chelsea in the women's game, they have not just come in and swept the floor with transfers. they have been able to spend, but it's a little more balanced. Now, PSG in the game, I am not using any name fixes or mods or anything like that with any of my episodes in the beta because I want to see what Sports Interactive puts out. It makes it cleaner to determine what's real and what's not. So you have to type in Paris SG to get PSG. They've got 25 players, have an average age of 23 years old. How disgusting is that? They're that good with an average age like that. I mean, that is just gross. So you can see the squad here, and now 10 years into the future, they're at 29 players with an average age of 28. But again, you see Doué's there. So is that just that the players they had that were average age 23 have all gotten 10 years older, and some of them were so young that they're still around and they've refreshed with some younger players, but those players that were there to begin with are still really good? They have a lot of attacking midfield talent, not a lot of just pure midfield talent, I would argue, in comparison. But again, some of those players are out on loan, including Nick Voltemade, who they picked up from Newcastle for, the paltry sum of 129 million. Their second team just has 15 players in it, which is a bit of a surprise to me. And the under-19s have just 17 players. I was expecting more gobbling up of players and stuffing them into the second team. Maybe that's what happens to a couple of these folks, but again, they've got loans that they can do and all that kind of stuff. The spend on this one is where it gets, I think, a little interesting. This transfer from June 23rd is counting for this season. So they've already spent 79 million, but it also shows up in the previous season. So that's interesting. It also shows up in the season before that. So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it was a loan that got converted. Let's look. Nope, not sure what's happening there. In 32-33, they had a lot more transfers out than they had transfers in, including Cole Palmer leaving for 85 million and Lucas Chevalier leaving for 108 million to Arsenal. But it was balanced the year before that, balanced the other way the year before that, balanced and a lot smaller in 29-30, which is kind of curious. Somewhat balanced in 28-29, out of whack in 27 and 28, kind of like Manchester City. And that's where you're seeing they picked up Cole Palmer for 229 million and Lissandro from Manchester United for 89 million, Jorginho Rutter from Brighton for 76 million. Last but not least, let's look at Inter Miami, and it seems off to me. So they got 26 players, age of 25. They do have at least 2 DPs, designated players, if you don't know what that is in MLS. One is Idan Toklamati, the other one is Tom Anderson. But the real problems begin on the transfer history screen. Now, I'm not currently managing Inter Miami, but these boxes are overlapping. It says current season because it's obviously a January to December calendar in MLS. So this is in the middle of the 2035 season. You can see they brought in 7 transfers, all on freeze. They've had 6 transfers out. One player that you can kind of see here, Osman Kamara, went to FC Utrecht for 3.6 million. Everybody else was either on loan or left as a free agent. And when you do the drop-down box, this should just say 2034, right? Because we're doing January to December, but it doesn't. So it's showing me 33/34, but there is nothing in 2034 in this part of the transfer history. And again, all free agents coming in, 2 players going out on transfer fees, 1 as a free agent. Previous season shows me 2032. There is players coming from other clubs here, and one of them for 12 million, Conrad Cruzat, but a lot of free agents. So there's a lot of turnover on the squad, and a lot of that, at least later on, appears to be free agents. And that could just be the AI trying to build the squad to meet all the registration requirements. It's also a bit strange. I've just clicked through down to 26-27. Like, you have to scroll. This box is like broken. It shouldn't be scrunched down this small. So there's still work to be doing. I guess I did a video and I put the link up top for you to see. I just think the reason I'm testing MLS and the other video I did with MLS and NWSL and both of the Australian leagues, the men and the women's, is that I feel like those are more edge cases where Europe is more, this is our bread and butter for Football Manager. And admittedly, MLS and NWSL and the Aussie leagues are very complicated with their rules. But if you want an immersive experience, it has to work if it's going to be in the game. And it's kind of hard to tell from this if it's really working, but the transfer history screen itself isn't working. So that makes me a bit nervous to recommend anybody try to play in these leagues until we get some clarification. So someone in my Discord helpfully found a Wonderkids list or potential Wonderkids list from FM Scout. I'll put the link in the description. What I've done is kind of gone through some of the various position groups and found relatively young Wonderkids. Like, most of these are going to be 16, because I think that gives a better idea what you as a player might go try and sneak and grab a Wonderkid if that's how you like to play. and it gives the AI more time to do that and more time for these players' careers to develop versus, say, a 20-year-old who's already pretty good and most likely on everybody's radar already. The first player we have here is Nathan De Cat. I apologize if I'm pronouncing any of these wrong. Who starts his career at Anderlecht, and in 25-26, he starts 37 games for the club, starts the next season 26, and then gets picked up by Arsenal for 74 million. But they're not hoarding, at least for this player. They are playing Nathan De Cat. They signed him, and he's played a bunch in the Premier League. Saba Kerbashvili, again, sorry on the pronunciation, is a stud left back playing for Dynamo Sibli in Georgia. He gets picked up the second season, so there looks like they're playing on a January to December type calendar. In 2026, he plays 27 games and then gets sold for 3.8 million to PSG. And it shows that he's playing here, but the lack of the league tells you that is in the second team or the reserves, however you want to look at it. Doesn't play a whole lot for the first team, but again, he was 16 years old, as was Nathan De Cat. I didn't mention that. So by the time that he gets to 2030, when he's about 21 years old, he gets picked up by Real Sociedad for 36 million. So I don't think he's really rotting in the reserves. He just was really young and needed to grow up. Abubakar Seti Quinta starts the game at 18 years old. You can see he's at Sassuolo right now. He's surplus to requirements, but he starts out at Tromsø in Norway, gets sold to PSG for 5.75 million. So that looks like maybe that's a January transfer window. So he's 19 when that happens because his birthday's in November. And again, he makes a sub appearance. He doesn't do a whole lot, but then does move on. So he's not sitting in the reserves forever. PSG is now showing that it's got the financial might. But again, I think that's what PSG is doing anyways. They're buying lots of players and seeing who makes it. And then he gets sold on and continues his career. So he doesn't get stuck, I guess, is my point. We've got Trevin Sanusi, who starts out as 18 years old. He starts the game at Newcastle. They do loan him, but they are loaning him for development purposes, and he's loving it. Look at those ratings. And then he leaves on a free. So after he's kind of maybe past the age where you'd want to loan him for development, he doesn't get to play a lot. He's kind of that impact sub, only gets a total of 9 appearances in 2 seasons, and then leaves on a free, but continues his career. Gilberto Mora starts the game at 16 years old as well, playing for Club Tijuana in Mexico. He does play over the first 2 seasons in the game. PSG pick him up, actually PSG 2 pick him up, but he does break into the PSG squad a little bit earlier than some of the other players, and then leaves again. Our last one here will be Dastan Satpayev, who starts the game at 16 years old playing for Karait in Kazakhstan. He's sold the next season to Chelsea for 4 million. Chelsea, with that model of going and buying players and then loaning them out, they loan him to Germany into the Zweite Bundesliga. It almost looks like they do it in back-to-back seasons, but they actually held on to him and used him for 6 games in the 27-28 season. He gets loaned again. He actually plays a little bit for Chelsea, so they actually have developed this player, and then he leaves on a free. One last strange little thing that I can't figure out. I was trying to track these players and add them. I'm using an unemployed manager. You can add them to an indefinite short list. There is no short list. It's not an option. So that's a weird thing. But I think overall, what I've seen, and again, you may disagree, you may know more about squad building than I do, and I only looked at like the top level leagues. I didn't do anything down in the Vanarama National League or anything like that. Maybe there's a different set of problems with hoarding right backs in those leagues. But overall, nothing really screamed overwhelmingly broken. I do think you saw there, obviously, PSG picks up a lot of players, but I think that's also kind of reality. I'm going to sneak one last club in here at the end because Samuel Ferreira left a comment on a post I left on YouTube asking for suggestions. He says, Benfica is known for making young stars and buying young players so they can sell them on. And yet, on FM, the AI just goes out and spends all the money they have on a bunch of washed up, ex-prim, and known quantities, which goes completely against the style of transfers that the club makes. We're in 2035. The first thing that is a bit odd, and I've checked, the club is rich. It says finances are rich. 35-36, no transfers. That might be normal. It's going into the next season. 34-35, no transfers. Like, nobody in nor out. 33-34, nobody in nor out. And then you've got a bunch of transfers in 32 and 33. Now, I have looked through this. I have not seen a ton of like ex-Premier League players. Clearly, we can see Kaspar Thulis is in on loan from Man City. But as of now, in 2035, he's 25 years old. So when they brought him in, he was still relatively young and he was on loan. And they are selling players to clubs in bigger leagues. Now, this is really interesting. Renato Naga shows that he's come to Benfica from Benfica with an 80 million profit on zero. Here's what happened. They pick him up on a free from Casapia and then sold him to Real Madrid in 34-35 for 69 million. I have no idea where the 80 million's coming from. I think that's somehow bugged. In 26-27, they do sign this guy from Aston Villa. It says that he's 34 now, but at the time, he wouldn't have been, so maybe he doesn't qualify as that washed-up ex-Premier League player. So Samuel, hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better. Obviously, I've used a medium-sized database here, so it would holiday in relatively quickly, and it's just one simulation, but maybe that gives you a little bit of hope about your club. And that's where we're going to end it, my friends. I hope you found that interesting and insightful. Maybe it makes you feel a little bit better about squad building, aside from maybe PSG. But again, I think in reality today in 2025, that's probably actually a problem that's happening. I'm sure there are different clubs that I could have looked at or players that you would have wanted to see. I'd be glad to hear about those in the comments. But until next time, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you then.